All right, ready to dive into some classic cinema.
Absolutely. Always up for a good film discussion.
Well, today we're going deep into three iconic films from the 1970s. Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, An Unmarried Woman, and Looking for Mr. Goodbar.
Ooh, interesting choices. All powerful films dealing with women's lives in a time of big social change.
Exactly. We're going to explore how each film portrays women's independence and empowerment, compare and contrast their journeys.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to see how each film tackles these themes in a unique way.
Right. It's not just about women on their own, but the nuances of those experiences, the challenges, the triumphs, the different ways they found strength and community.
Definitely. And the societal context of the 1970s plays a huge role too, with all the shifting expectations around gender roles and relationships.
Totally. And then we can't forget the impact these films had on feminist cinema,
Yeah.
paving the way for more complex and diverse portrayals of women on screen.
For sure. They were groundbreaking in so many ways. Okay, so where do we start?
Well, let's begin with Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. This film, released in '74, follows Alice, a recently widowed mother who hits the road with her son, chasing her dream of becoming a singer.
Yeah, it's a classic road trip movie, but with a really powerful emotional core.
What surprised me was learning that he was directed by Martin Scorsese, the guy known for those gritty gangster flicks like Taxi Driver.
Right. It just shows you how much the cinematic landscape was shifting at that time. Even a director like Scorsese saw the potential in a story about a woman's interior life and her struggle for independence.
And what's striking is how Alice's independence isn't just about her actions, like hitting the road and finding work. It's also about her spirit.
Oh, absolutely. She doesn't crumble under pressure. She pushes back against those societal expectations, even when it's uncomfortable.
Exactly. Remember that scene where she confronts that pushy customer at the diner where she's working as a waitress?
Oh, yeah, that's intense. It shows her refusing to be a victim. She's vulnerable, yeah, but she's also fierce and protective of herself and her son.
Totally. That scene highlights the film's realism, right? Alice's journey isn't romanticized. It shows the risks and dangers that women, especially single mothers, often faced.
It's a reminder that seeking independence could come at a cost. Okay, now let's shift gears to An Unmarried Woman from '78.
Okay, this one hits hard. It tells the story of Erica, whose seemingly perfect life implodes when her husband leaves her for a younger woman.
Oof, yeah, talk about a life-altering event. But it's not just about heartbreak and divorce. The film really delves into those societal expectations that were placed on women back then.
Right, where their identity was often tied to their marital status. Even the title An Unmarried Woman feels loaded with those societal judgments.
It's true. The film explores what it meant for a woman to rebuild her life, her sense of self outside those traditional roles.
And I find it interesting how Erica's journey is reflected in her evolving taste in art.
Oh, you noticed that too. At the start, she's surrounded by her husband's conservative art choices, but by the end, she's drawn to the raw, emotional work of this abstract expressionist painter, Saul.
Yeah. It's like her artistic sensibilities are mirroring her own embrace of vulnerability and self-expression.
It's such a smart visual detail. It's not just the dialogue. The film's visual language is speaking volumes too.
Totally agree. But while both Alice and Erica are on these journeys of self-discovery, their paths are quite different, wouldn't you say?
Oh, for sure. Alice is thrust into independence by circumstance, while Erica has to confront it after a betrayal.
Right. And their initial motivations are different too. Alice is focused on fulfilling a dream, while Erica is grappling with a profound loss.
But what's interesting is that they both find solace and strength in their female friendships.
Like, Alice has Flo and Vera at the diner, giving her that blunt advice and support, and then Erica has her close group of friends who rally around her, offering a mix of emotional support and humor.
Exactly. These female friendships highlight a key theme running through all these films, the importance of women supporting each other.
Yeah, especially in a world that often pitted them against each other or tried to define them solely through their relationships with men.
Right. It's about finding strength and solidarity in shared experiences.
For sure. But then we have Looking for Mr. Goodbar, released in '77, which takes a much darker turn.
Oh yeah, this one's intense.
This film, inspired by a real-life tragedy, centers on Teresa Dunn, a young schoolteacher leading a double life. What do you think drew audiences to this story, especially in the context of the 1970s?
Hmm. Well, I think it tapped into a lot of the anxieties of that time.
Yeah, especially around women's changing roles and the loosening of social mores.
Right. Teresa's desire for sexual liberation, her exploration outside of her conservative upbringing, it resonated with that shifting cultural landscape.
But at the same time, the film serves as a cautionary tale.
It does. It highlights those potential dangers for women in a society that wasn't always ready for their newfound agency.
And it sparked a lot of debate about sexuality, safety, and the dark side of a changing world.
Absolutely. And unlike the more optimistic endings of Alice and An Unmarried Woman, Teresa's story ends tragically, which must have been quite shocking for audiences back then.
Definitely. It was a bold choice by the filmmakers. A bold choice that forced viewers to confront the complexities and potential pitfalls of a woman seeking freedom and self-discovery.
It definitely wasn't a sugar-coated version of female empowerment.
Not at all. It's interesting how each film reflects those specific anxieties and contradictions of the 1970s.
Yeah, that's what makes them so fascinating to revisit. You see the rise of disco culture, the loosening of sexual norms, but also like those lingering traditional values and expectations.
It's like the decade was caught between the old and the new,
Mm,
and these films capture that tension so well.
they really do. So do you think these films still resonate with audiences today?
I absolutely think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, while the specific cultural context might have shifted,
Hmm.
the core themes of these films, the desire for self-discovery, the struggle for equality, the complexities of relationships, they're timeless.
You're right. Those are human experiences that transcend any particular era.
Exactly. And that brings us to the question, how would these stories be told in a modern context?
Now that's where things get really interesting. Imagine Alice trying to make it as a singer, but like on YouTube or something, while juggling childcare and, online dating.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's a modern-day Alice, for sure.
Right, dealing with algorithms and online trolls instead of shady club owners.
And how about Erica? I could totally see her starting a business, maybe a cool art gallery or a design firm showcasing women artists.
Ooh, I love that. She'd be curating those powerful, abstract pieces reflecting her own journey of self-expression.
Right. And think about how social media would factor into their lives.
Oh my gosh, totally. The pressure to portray that perfect life, those filtered images of success and independence, it would add a whole new layer of complexity.
It's true. And Teresa's story, it feels even more relevant today, sadly, in the age of dating apps and hookup culture.
Yeah, her yearning for connection, for freedom, it could easily play out in a modern setting, but the risks might be even greater.
Exactly. It's like the digital world can amplify those dangers, you know?
It can definitely blur those lines between connection and exploitation.
But you know what's striking to me? It's how these films, even though they're products of their time, they tap into something universal about the female experience.
Oh, yeah. Those desires for autonomy, the struggle for self-definition, the whole navigation of relationships and societal expectations.
It's all still relevant today, even if the context has shifted. It's like those core struggles haven't disappeared.
Speaking of which, we got to talk about the impact these films had on feminist cinema. I mean, they weren't just telling stories, they were challenging conventions, pushing those boundaries.
They were absolutely groundbreaking. They weren't afraid to show women's desires, their anger, their vulnerabilities, all those experiences that had often been silenced.
Exactly. And it's not just one type of woman or one type of experience. We see that range, right? Totally. You have Alice seeking both love and personal fulfillment, Erica reclaiming her identity after loss, and even Teresa, her story, while tragic, it forces us to confront those darker aspects of society, those dangers women face, even as they try to break free.
And they highlight the importance of female friendships, the support systems that are so vital when you're navigating a world that's not always on your side.
Oh, for sure. Those scenes where the women come together, offering advice, sharing laughter, it's so powerful.
It's like those bonds of friendship are what helped them through those tough times, you know.
Absolutely. And they remind us that we don't have to go through it alone. But something else that struck me while revisiting these films, it's how the visual style and setting play a role too.
Oh, totally. Like
Yeah.
Alice doesn't live here anymore. With that road trip vibe, those vibrant colors, it captures that sense of possibility, that freedom Alice is seeking.
Right. And then you have An Unmarried Woman with that sophisticated urban setting reflecting Erica's journey in the art and culture scene of New York City.
And then Looking for Mr. Goodbar uses a darker, grittier aesthetic to mirror the dangers and anxieties surrounding Teresa's nightlife explorations.
It's like the filmmakers really understood the power of visual storytelling, using the look and feel of the film to enhance the emotional impact.
It's not just the dialogue, it's the whole cinematic experience working together. you know?
Right. They created these worlds that reflect the inner lives of these women, their hopes, their fears, their struggles.
It's fascinating. So what lessons do you think filmmakers today can learn from these movies? I mean, these films were made almost 50 years ago,
Well, they're a masterclass in character development. These characters are so real, so relatable, even with their flaws.
and the stories, they grab you even without needing those big action sequences or special effects.
It's all about those human dramas, the relationships, the internal struggles.
Mm.
And they show how to tackle complex social issues in a way that's both thought-provoking and entertaining.
And they remind us that even within a genre like feminist cinema, there's room for different perspectives, different styles.
Definitely. Alice offers a more hopeful take on liberation. An unmarried woman delves into the complexities of starting over, and looking for Mr. Goodbar serves as that stark warning about the dangers that still exist.
Yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all narrative when it comes to women's experiences. It never is.
And that diversity is what makes these films so rich and rewarding. They get us thinking about gender roles, expectations, and the whole fight for equality, which is sadly still ongoing.
It is. Speaking of which, did you know that Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore was actually Scorsese's first Hollywood studio production?
Wait, really? I had no idea. It seems so different from his earlier, more independent work.
I know. It just shows that even a director known for a certain style can be drawn to stories that push boundaries and offer fresh perspectives.
That's so cool. It's like sometimes great filmmaking comes from unexpected places. Speaking of unexpected things, did you notice those abstract paintings in An Unmarried Woman?
Oh yeah, they were hard to miss. They seemed really significant, almost like a visual representation of Erica's emotional journey.
They were. And get this, those paintings were actually done by the famous artist Paul Jenkins. He even taught Alan Bates, the actor who played Saul, how to paint for the role.
Wow, that's dedication to detail. I had no idea. It adds a whole new layer of meaning to that film's exploration of art and personal expression.
It does. It's like the art itself becomes a character in the story. And it speaks to the power of collaboration between different artists, like a painter, a filmmaker, actors all working together.
It reminds us that film is a collaborative art form. And when those creative voices align, the results can be pretty amazing.
Speaking of amazing moments, let's talk about some specific scenes that stuck with us from these movies. What really stood out to you?
Okay, and Alice doesn't live here anymore. That scene where Alice just breaks down in front of her son after all those setbacks, ugh, got me right in the feels.
Oh, yeah, that one's a tearjerker. It shows that even the strongest people have those moments of vulnerability.
Totally. And I love how her son comforts her. It's such a tender moment that reminds us about the power of family.
It is. It's like even amidst all that hardship, there's still love and connection. And for me, in An Unmarried Woman, that scene where Erica finally confronts her husband is just, wow.
Oh my gosh, yes. That scene is incredible. The way Joe Klaber delivers those lines, it's like you can see that shift within Erica from heartbroken wife to a woman ready to reclaim her power.
Exactly. It's like a turning point in her journey. And then in Looking for Mr. Goodbar, there's that scene where Teresa's being followed home by that creepy guy after a night out. Ugh, talk about unsettling.
Oh yeah, that scene is so effective in building that tension. It's a reminder that even as women were seeking more freedom, they still faced real threats to their safety.
It's a sobering reminder that even in the midst of progress, those dangers still lurk. And it's important to remember that these films, while fictional, were often inspired by real-life events and anxieties of that time.
Right, they reflect those changing times, but those themes, they still speak to us today.
They really do. So how do you think things have changed for women since the 1970s? Have we made progress? Are there still challenges?
Those are big questions. Questions that deserve their own deep dive, honestly. It feels like we've come a long way since the 70s when it comes to women's rights and representation, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's been a lot of progress, but
Right.
but I'm curious how these films would be received by audiences today, especially younger generations who haven't experienced those same social constraints.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, would they even relate to those struggles?
It's hard to say. I mean, these films tap into those universal themes of self-discovery, love, ambition. Those are things that resonate across generations.
True. It's not just about the historical context. It's those emotional cores of these stories that make them powerful.
Right. But we can't deny that norms have shifted. What was groundbreaking then? Like a woman choosing to be single or focus on her career. It's much more accepted now.
Totally. I wonder if some of the conflicts in these films might even seem tame to younger viewers.
Maybe. But that could lead to interesting conversations, right? It's a chance to reflect on how far we've come, but also acknowledge that the fight for equality isn't over.
No, it's definitely not.
Issues like pay equity, reproductive rights, representation, those are still battles being fought.
It's a reminder that progress isn't always a straight line. It's like this ongoing journey, and these films, they can be a starting point for those conversations.
They can, and they can inspire us to look for modern stories that are pushing those boundaries,
Yeah.
challenging how we think about gender and expectations. Have you seen any recent films or TV shows that resonate with these themes?
Oh, totally. There's this show I've been binging about women who started a tech company in the 80s. It's fiction, but it gets into those themes of ambition, competition, all in that male-dominated world.
That sounds awesome. I'll have to check it out. It's so cool to see how these themes keep evolving and being explored in new ways.
Yeah, it's a reminder that the stories we tell have power, right? They can shape our understanding of the world and inspire change.
Exactly. And that's what makes those films from the 70s so enduring. They're not just entertainment. They're like cultural touchstones that keep those conversations going. They challenge us and remind us of the power of human resilience.
And they show us the importance of fighting for a more just world, right?
Oh, absolutely. They stick with you, those films. They make you think about your own life, your choices, and the world you want to create.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, what's the one thing you really hope listeners will take away from this conversation?
I think it's that the quest for independence and empowerment. It's an ongoing journey, both for us as individuals and for society. And these films, they offer a glimpse into that journey.
And they remind us that we don't have to do it alone. Finding that community, supporting each other, celebrating those victories, that's essential.
It is. So to our listeners, keep exploring these films, Seek out those modern stories that resonate with you and keep those conversations going.
Because the more we understand the past, the better equipped we are to create the future we want to see. Well, that's a wrap on our deep dive into women's independence and empowerment in 70s cinema.
Loved this conversation. Always fascinating to revisit those classics and see how they connect to today's world.
Me too. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and to our listeners, stay tuned for more insightful discussions coming soon.